Somewhere between the hour you fell asleep and the hour your alarm goes off, your yard stops being your yard. It becomes something else entirely. A shift change, a survival window, a stretch of darkness where the birds you think you know are doing things you have never once witnessed. You've lived beside this for years, every single night, and you have missed all of it. Most people assume birds go dark at sunset and stay that way until the first light hits the trees. Tuck in, go quiet, wait for morning. That assumption is wrong in almost every way that matters. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., your backyard is running a survival operation more intricate than anything you'll see during daylight hours, and it is happening 2 feet from your bedroom window. Welcome to Bird Whisper. Subscribe before you leave, because tonight, right now, this is happening again. And by the end of this video, you won't be able to walk past your own yard the same way. Today, we're breaking down the exact hour-by-hour reality of what's happening outside while you sleep. Stay until the end, because the last segment covers a behavior discovered almost by accident, one that suggests certain birds are making calculated risk decisions in the dark that most researchers didn't think birds were capable of. Let's start at 2 a.m. sharp with the bird most people picture as asleep, the one tucked into the arborvitae by your fence line. A house finch weighing roughly 21 grams is perched 8 inches deep into the densest part of that shrub, and it is not fully unconscious. Ornithologists have spent decades documenting something called unihemispheric sleep in birds, the ability to shut down one half of the brain while the other half stays online. The eye connected to the resting hemisphere closes. The eye connected to the active hemisphere stays open, tracking movement in low light. The bird rotates which side is on roughly every 15 to 25 minutes throughout the night, meaning across an 8-hour night, that finch cycles through dozens of partial wake states. It is never fully asleep and never fully awake. It is holding a middle position that most mammals, including you, cannot physically achieve.
Why does this matter specifically in the 2 to 4 a.m. window? Because this stretch sits at the coldest point of the nightly temperature curve. Heat radiates out of the ground and out of exposed surfaces for hours after sunset, and the lowest reading of the whole night almost always lands in the 2 hours before the sky starts to lighten. For a bird that size, cold isn't uncomfortable, it's a countdown. A house finch carries maybe 10 to 12 hours of usable fat reserve on a cold night, and by 2 a.m. it has already been burning through that reserve for 6 or 7 hours without a single calorie coming in. The math doesn't forgive mistakes. So the bird adjusts. Research on small passerines has shown controlled nighttime temperature drops of a few degrees during the coldest hours, a deliberate metabolic dial-down that stretches fuel just far enough to survive until first light, but not so far that the bird can't snap into flight if something moves nearby. It's a tightrope walked in total darkness, recalculated minute by minute, and it's happening in a bush you walk past every single day without a thought. Now go higher up, into the cavity nesters, the woodpecker hole in the dead limb of your neighbor's maple, or the gourd birdhouse hanging off your gutter. This is where things stop looking like sleep entirely and start looking like something closer to shutdown. A tufted titmouse roosting in a cavity at 2:40 a.m. on a freezing night can drop its core body temperature significantly below its daytime baseline. Heart rate falls, breathing slows to a fraction of the daytime rate. This isn't rest, it's regulated hypothermia, a controlled near shutdown that lets a bird the weight of a few coins survive conditions that would otherwise be lethal for something so small. Without this adaptation, cavity roosting songbirds simply could not exist this far north. The energy cost of holding a normal body temperature through a long winter night exceeds what a bird that size can physically carry as fuel. But here's the part that should unsettle you a little. A bird in this state isn't defenseless. Thermal imaging studies on roosting cavities have shown that even deep in this near-shutdown state, birds retain a threat detection trigger. A scrape of claws on bark near the cavity entrance, a sudden vibration, a shift in air pressure from something large approaching. Any of it can slam the bird back to full alert in under a minute, temperature and heart rate spiking almost instantly. That emergency spike is expensive. It burns through a chunk of the night's remaining fuel in one shot. Trigger it more than once or twice in a night, and the bird may not have enough reserve left to make it to sunrise, which is exactly why the quietest hours of your night, the ones you assume are wasted, empty hours, are the most dangerous hours of that bird's entire day.
While the finches and titmice are locked into that balancing act on the ground and in the cavities, something else entirely is happening above your roofline, and it's happening at a scale that's difficult to process. At roughly 3:15 a.m. on a clear night in migration season, there could be tens of thousands of birds crossing directly over your house, not circling, not stopping, passing straight through, at altitude, in total darkness. Weather radar tracking projects run by ornithology labs have turned this invisible movement into something you can actually see on a screen. Massive pulses of birds lifting off shortly after dusk, climbing to cruising altitude, and flying steadily through the night before dropping down to rest and refuel at dawn. The 2 to 4 a.m. window sits almost exactly at the midpoint of that flight, the point at which a bird is fully committed, too far from where it started to turn back, and not yet close enough to see where it's going to land. The reason they fly at night instead of during the day comes down to two things. The air is more stable without daytime heat creating turbulence, and the daytime predators that would otherwise pick them off are grounded. But flying blind through the night means navigating using senses that don't have a real human equivalent. Some species can perceive the Earth's magnetic field visually through a light-sensitive protein in the eye that appears to overlay directional information onto their vision. Others recalibrate constantly against rotating star patterns, adjusting heading through the night as the sky turns above them. A warbler crossing over your chimney at 3 in the morning isn't stumbling through darkness, it's reading a sky full of information you were never built to see. Not every bird out there is traveling or surviving the cold, though. Some of them are hunting. Picture a barred owl, motionless on a low branch at the edge of your property line, absolutely still for 10 or 12 minutes at a stretch. This window, 2 to 4 a.m., lines up almost perfectly with peak activity for small ground mammals, the mice and voles that make up the bulk of an owl's diet. Owl hearing is precise enough to pinpoint a mouse moving under snow cover from dozens of feet away, and specialized wing feathers break up airflow so completely that the strike itself makes almost no sound. From launch to impact, the entire attack takes less time than it took you to read this sentence. For every roosting songbird within earshot, that owl's presence isn't abstract. Owls call intermittently through the night, and those calls are being monitored, actively, continuously by every bird nearby, feeding directly into the same threat calculations driving the torpor and the vigilance we already talked about. The night isn't just cold, it's being washed from multiple directions at once, and every bird in your yard knows it. Then there's the piece that genuinely caught researchers off guard. In neighborhoods with heavy artificial lighting, street lamps, porch lights, security floodlights, some birds have started singing full territorial song hours before actual dawn, sometimes as early as 2 or 3 a.m. For years, this looked like a fluke in early recordings. It isn't. Birds calibrate their internal clock heavily off ambient light levels, and in a well-lit yard, a porch light can be functionally indistinguishable from early morning light to a bird's circadian system. The bird's internal calendar gets hijacked, it believes morning has arrived, and it responds the only way it knows how, by singing. That's not a charming quirk. Singing costs energy, and singing at 2 a.m. means burning reserves the bird needs to survive the coldest stretch still ahead of it, hours before the real dawn will arrive to let it refuel. Birds living under heavy light pollution consistently show lower body weights and higher stress markers than birds in darker areas nearby. If you've ever heard a bird singing in the dead of night and thought it sounded sweet, what you were actually hearing was a biological system running on false information, spending fuel it may not get back. So what does all of this add up to? Your yard between 2 and 4 a.m. isn't empty. It isn't quiet in any meaningful sense. It's a live operation running on tight margins. A finch rationing body heat degree by degree. A titmouse suspended in near shutdown with one finger on the emergency switch. Tens of thousands of birds crossing overhead using senses you don't have. An owl converting stillness into a 2-second kill. And somewhere down the street, a bird singing to a light it mistook for the sun. None of this asks anything from you except attention. You don't need to do anything differently tonight. You just need to know it's happening, because it always is, whether you're watching or not. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been up in the middle of the night and heard something outside you couldn't explain? A call, a sound, something moving? I want to hear about it. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.